Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today, dear viewers, the Adam channel will introduce you the video which bears the title Is Syriac the Key That Unlocks the Meaning of the Quran by Gabriel Said Reynolds. We will try to answer on the main points of his elaboration, and even he uses a soft language and has a more academic stance. We will answer in the way which is academic and suitable to Islamic knowledge and Islamic studies. But also we will show that if you look the academic writings, we can only find answers on his, we will say, accusations that Syriac language, and it's very much because of this the Quranic language is incorporated, and it's because of its close relation with Syriac and Arabic. So the Quranic language is taking the words which are from Syriac and introducing it to the people in early Arabia. So his mainly stance is that Syriac is essentially Christian Aramaic, which is developed around the 1st century AD in Edessa, modern day Urfa, Turkey. In historical context, he used a wide, for example, it was used in from Arabia to India, even China. It was employed by various Christian churches, including Eastern Orthodox Syrian churches, as a waste literary output in various genres, including religious texts, philosophy, medicine, history. So his claims are that Syriac is key to understanding the true meaning of the Quran. There is a controversial theory suggests that in the Quran, the maidens of paradise might actually refer to grapes when viewed through the lens of Syriac. Also, the structure, we say it's he's covering basic introduction to Syriac. It's relevant to Quranic vocabulary. He's making connections, and when you see his main claim is that the Quranic language is from Syriac, so it was made by Syriac language, and indeed he says this is the key that unlocks the meaning of the Quran. So we will answer this meaning and let we hear the points.
If you've listened in to debates about the academic study of the Quran a bit, you might have heard the word Syriac. You might know that Syriac is a language. You might know that it's a language closely related to Arabic. You might even have heard claims that the Syriac language has something to do with the Quran, or even that Syriac is the key that unlocks the true meaning of the Quran. Maybe the most famous and controversial manifestation of this idea was a theory that when you read the Quran in the light of the Syriac language, you discover that the so-called maidens of paradise, these young, beautiful women that are given to the blessed, or maybe just to the martyrs when they arrive in paradise, are actually not maidens or young women at all, but grapes. We're going to speak about the Syriac language generally, about its relevance for Quranic studies, and we're even going to touch on the question of the virgins or maidens of paradise and whether they are really grapes. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and share with you here a PowerPoint focusing on this question of, is Syriac the key that
Seeing that he's mentioning that the name of Isaac, Ishaq, and Pharaoh, Firaun, which are mentioned in the Quran and also in Syriac language. So he's also using and mentioning the terms like Deen, judgment, Qurban, sacrifice, and Ruhul Qudus, Holy Spirit. Also the word Furqan and possible Syriac origin. What can we say about this? So when we have the first terms like Isaac, there are similarities with the Syriac Ishaq. We know that Quranic form aligns with the Arabic linguistic structure. The similarities could be attributed to the common Semitic root shared by Arabic and Syriac, and the Quranic usage, and we have gave them good tidings of Isaac, a prophet from among the righteous, and this is normal. I don't see any allegation which just the similarities of the languages, and thanks God, this is a proof for the right stance of the Quran in forming the names, because the names are directly from God, and God knows the best how to call His prophets. So on the other stance, we have also the term Syriac for Pharaoh and Perun. So it's also important to know that the Egyptian loan words were common in Semitic language and the Quranic context. And Pharaoh said, "O eminent ones, I have not known you to have a god other than me." So he was stating that he is a god, he is the tyrant. So the same meaning of Pharaoh, it's okay for me. The terms din, while in some contexts it means religion, we should know that it's not just like that. Also means judgment, and similar to Syriac usage. It doesn't divide. So when we say Master of the Day of Judgment, uh, Yawmuddin. Also, this multi-faced meaning enriches the Quranic text and doesn't necessarily imply borrowing. When we mention Qurban, in term of sacrifice, this term does have parallels in Syriac and Hebrew. Quranic usage when they both offer the sacrifice, Qurbanan. In the concept sacrifice to draw near to God is common in Semitic religions, explaining the shared terminology. It's not the sacrifice now the modern Christianity is using. Also, the Ruhul Qudus. While similar to Syriac, Ruhat Qudus, Qudsa, the Quranic usage is distinct. In the Quran, it's often referred to the angel Jibril. Say the Holy Spirit, Ruhul Qudus, has brought it down from your Lord in truth. When we mention Furqan, for example, this term often translated as criterion has been suggested to have Syriac origins. Quranic usage, blessed is he who sent down the criterion upon his servant. Islamic scholars often interpret it a unique Quranic concept, distinguish between truth and falsehood.
Of
So,
redemption or salvation. So is the Quran sort of channeling or riffing on that Syriac term? Okay, I'm going to go on to two Syriac legends which are related to Quranic stories. First is the Companions of the Cave. Allow me for just one moment first to introduce you to this kind of really cool work of art, which you find in this image here. This is by Sandow Birk, who wrote a work or produced a work called The American Quran, in which
so, we won't touch the Syriac uh, explanation about the historical context. We know that Syriac is part of the linguistic and cultural environment in which Islam emerged, and Islamic societies are very well aware of it. And we know that there can be some signs which interconnect in this context, but comparative linguistics, also studying Syriac alongside Arabic, could help scholars better understand the etymology and semantic reach of certain Quranic terms. So they can potentially lead to more nuanced interpretation, but we want to stick to the point which he is pointing out. And when we examine parallels between Syriac Christian texts and Quranic narratives, we might offer insight into shared cultural stories. We will just skip up and go to the main points which he is making attention to about Zulkarnain and the inhabitants of the cave. So we will hear what he has to say.
that Muslim Americans would have a way of situating their tradition in the American context. But note this, this illuminated page, which is channeling the story of the companions of the cave. Notice that there's a dog here. We're going to get back to the dog, but instead of setting this somewhere in the Middle East, Sandoberg sets this in the Appalachians. I mean, imagine West Virginia, where a coal mine has just collapsed. So they're stuck in this cave with their dog. Okay, so let's get on to the companion.
We have Islamic scholarly perspective, which is shared Semitic roots. Many similarities can be attributed to the common Semitic origins, Arabic and Syriac, rather than direct borrowing. Divine wisdom of revelation. Allah may have chosen familiar terms to convey new meanings, facilitating understanding for initial audience. We have the linguistic miracle, Ijaz. The Quranic unique use of these terms contributes to the inimitable linguistic style. Historical context, the presence of Syriac speaking communities in the region explains shared linguistic elements without diminishing the Quran divine origin. So the message is to the Semitic people in one area which they receive. And the emphasis on meaning Islamic scholarship focuses on the Quranic application and context of these terms rather than etymological origin. So while acknowledging linguistic similarities, Islamic academics maintain that the Quran use of these terms is unique and divinely inspired. The similarities reflect the wisdom of Allah in revealing the Quran in a language and context familiar to its initial recipients, while conveying new or profound meanings. As stated in the Quran, indeed we have sent it down as an Arabic Quran that you might understand it. On the other things which we should mention and Islamic viewpoint, for example, the about Zulkarnain and inhabitants of the cave, we can say the companions of the cave, also inhabitants of the cave. It's more like they are living, but this is companions of the cave, Ashab al-Kahf. In the Quran, Surah al-Kahf, chapter 18, verse 18, specifically mentioned the dog position. So when he is saying that the dog position is there and mentioning that it was in the drawing using from the Quran, which was not the one who we use because it's illustrated and probably like many things which are illustrated in many churches and many Bibles, it gets a wrong impression. So if you looked at them, you would have turned from them in flight and been filled with terror of them. This is what uh, the the mentioning of the dog position, but we find it. And we turned them to the right and to the left while their dog stretched his forelegs at the entrance. Please remember this, at the entrance, not in the cave. So the key points to note: position of the dog, the Arabic word bilwasid is used, which refers to the threshold or entrance of the cave, not inside it. Why is this significant? Displacement of the dog at the entrance, rather than inside, aligns with Islamic teaching about the purity of space and the general view of dogs in Islamic tradition, so you cannot use it as a proof. It's even more proof that the Quran is true. Guardian role. The dog's position at the entrance suggests a protective or guardian role, which is consistent with the overall theme of divine protection in the story. So, contrast with the other versions, the specific detail in Quranic accounts differs from some other cultural and religious tellings of similar stories because the similar stories they say it's in the cave, while where the dog might be described as being inside and with the sleepers. So, symbolic interpretation. Some Islamic scholars have interpreted the dog presence in the position symbolically representing loyalty or vigilance, while still maintaining the physical separation from the sleepers inside the cave. I mentioned this because it was used in the elaboration. So when we speak about Zulkarnain in the Quranic narrative, we see that story of Zulkarnain mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf, and the Holy Quran has been subject to scholarly discussion. So we have the Quranic narrative. The Quran presents Zulkarnain as righteous ruler, granted power and knowledge by Allah. The narrative focuses on three of his journeys and his encounters with different people, emphasizing his just rule and faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So historical theories, while some academics theories suggest that Zulkarnain maybe the Alexander Great is Islamic scholarship which maintains a more cautious approach. So we acknowledge that these theories emphasize that Quranic figure may represent a different historical person or even a composite of multiple rulers. So when you say that two-horned one, he of two ages, this has led to various interpretations, including readings related to power of knowledge of East and West. When we focus on moral lessons, as scholars, we prioritize the spiritual and moral teachings. So the story illustrates the proper use of power as a trust from Allah, the importance of justice. And the context is we must understand this narrative. So it deals with trials of faith and the ephemeral nature of worldly power. Prophetic traditions, they have some additional details about Zulkarnain. We approach this narration with scholarly rigor, evaluating the authenticity and relevance. So we cannot take them in more in the approach we want with the Quran. So it's to provide insight into the nature and time period of this figure. So, acknowledging, we might see that Zulkarnain, even he established him upon the earth, gave everything. We see that he was very close time because the Quran narrative uses past times. So if it's around 600 after Christ, we see that there is only 900 years, and Islamic narrative goes to the time of Adam. So it's not so close time, but it's very close. It's closer than others. When you mention Moses and others, you see that it's something which is not typical Quranic pattern. Also, the monotheistic faith. The Quran portrays Zulkarnain as a believer in one God, Allah. So we know the history. I don't know how academic sources can cite this because we know every academic source says that Alexander was polytheist who considered himself divine. And the Quranic verse we said, O Dhul-Qarnayn, either you punish them or else adopt among them a way of goodness. This shows Dhul-Qarnayn receiving divine guidance, not the one who is himself divine. And the travelers, the Quranic account describes Dhul-Qarnayn reaching the setting of the sun and the rising of the sun, which could be interpreted as traveling to the extreme west and east. And Alexander conquest, while extensive, did not reach to Japan, for example. It did not reach the Europe far west, and this kind of approaches are not historically correct. Building the wall, the Dulkarnain described Dulkarnain building a great wall of iron and copper to protect people from Gog and Magog. There is no historical record of Alexander building such a structure. The title Zulkarnain in Arabic is Arabic, meaning the two-horned one, while Alexander was depicted with horns in some tradition. This specific Arabic title is not historically associated with him. The Quran presents Zulkarnain as a just and humble ruler. For example, he said, "This is a mercy from Lord." This character description doesn't fully align with historical accounts of Alexander. Also, the time frame of rule, the Quranic narrative suggests a long period of rule of Zulkarnain, while Alexander's reign was relatively short, at just around 13 years. There are alternative historical figures. Some Islamic scholars have proposed other historical figures as potential candidates for Zulkarnain, such as Cyrus the Great of Persia, who was known for the monotheistic leaning and waste conquest. The Quranic story focuses on moral and spiritual lessons rather than historical details, suggesting that the identity of Zulkarnain is less important than the ethical teaching derived from his actions. And it's important to note that from Islamic perspective, the exact historical identity of Zulkarnain is not crucial to understanding the moral and spiritual lessons of the Quranic narrative. In this, we conclude that there is no association with Zulkarnain, and we hope that this academic person, he should study more about this and take care of all accounts which we mentioned here, especially the accounts which are not so, which are not irrelevant. They are very relevant to the narrative which Quran is expressing and also the academic. So uh, we have to just touch the last topic, uh, which we should also mention the linguistic connection. Names like Ishaq and Firaun, concepts like Din, Qurban, these similarities are often attributed to the shared Semitic roots of Arabic and Syriac. And just like that, the Hur, Ain, controversy about Christoph Luxemburg theory about graves instead of virgin in paradise has been widely discussed. Islamic scholars generally reject this interpretation. They cite linguistic inconsistencies in the argument. Also, the Quran uses the marriage term "zawajnahum," we married them. So, when we say zawajnahum, we married them. So they are married. They are hurs, which are married, and the presence of other human figures in Quranic description of paradise. And this is the that's why we reject this. To academic approach for emendation. While some scholars propose emendation to the Quranic text, Islamic scholarship approaches this cautiously. As Devon Stewart notes, the merit of such proposals should be evaluated based on scholarly arguments rather than dismissed outright. And the Islamic scholarly perspective should be, when we see it from divine origin, to maintain the Quranic status as the direct word of Allah, perfect in His revelation. So we know that it's contextual understanding, recognizing the historical and linguistical context. It aids the deeper understanding and doesn't diminish the Quranic divine nature. So we have also caution engagement. While we engage with academic theories, we prioritize traditional Islamic exegesis and linguistic analysis. We emphasize on meaning that focus remains on deriving guidance and spiritual lesson from the Quranic text. And we have invitations for every human being, as the Quran says, then do they not reflect upon the Quran? Encourage yourself to thoughtfully engage within the text, to read it, and to understanding, and use your basira, use your diligence to understand it. So the study of Syriac in relation to Quran can provide valuable insight into the historical and linguistic context of revelation. However, as every Muslim and every Muslim scholars, we approach this field with a balance of academic rigor and faith-based understanding. We recognize the Quranic unique status and divine origin while appreciate the rich tapestry of languages and culture that form historical background. This approach will allow us to engage with academic discourse while maintaining the integrity of Islamic beliefs. And Allah knows best. We think that we showed the main proofs that everything which was stated has some sort of discrepancy and it's not so truthful. So we need to dive deeper in the context. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May Allah bless you.